call the council meeting to order. Everybody stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, take the roll.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here.
Morissette.
Here.
Wakefield.
Here.
Knudsen. Here. Kennedy.
Here.
Brooke.
Here.
Hall.
Here.
All right, first up are comments and suggestions from citizens present. This is your opportunity to weigh in on any issue that you'd like to talk about that is not on the agenda currently for this evening. If you do have a comment to make, please come to the podium, identify yourself, your address, keep your comments brief, try not to repeat other people's comments. So, does anybody have a comment? Any comment? Any comment? Any comment? Hearing none, we'll move on. Next is the swearing in of our new sergeant and lieutenant. Chief?
Good evening, council. So we're here tonight to recognize the promotions of Sergeant Elias Schindel and Lieutenant Brad Kuzmarek. Eli was hired by us in 2019 as a patrol officer, pretty much fresh out of college. He grew up in this area, so he's familiar with the community, and he's been a super great asset for our police department and the community since he's begun his work as a patrol officer. He served as a FTO, and he's taken it upon his own to seek out additional leadership training, up to and including leadership in police organizations, which is a pretty significant training program. So we're going to start with him up here.
I, Elias Schindel. Having been appointed as sergeant for the city of Hudson. Affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
Affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin.
And the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin.
And will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties.
And will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties.
Of said office to the best of my ability.
Of said office to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Our next promotion is Lieutenant Brad Kuzmarek. Lieutenant Kuzmarek started his law enforcement career in 1997 in Price County. Came to the city of Hudson in 2002, where he was promoted to patrol sergeant in 2008. He's worked in that capacity since that time. He's also taken on the duties of our compliance officer, which we're sad to see him leave that role. So Brad, come on up.
Raise your hand. I, Bradley Kuzmarek. Having been appointed as lieutenant for the city of Hudson. Affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
Affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin.
And the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin.
And will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties.
And will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties.
Of said office to the best of my ability.
Of said office to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Congratulations to you both. All right, consent agenda.
Approve the meeting minutes from the December 2nd, 2024 regular council meeting. Approve the claims in the amount of $1,636,803.21. Approve the appointment of Kathy Miller to the Board of Appeals. Approve a new confidential informant policy for the police department. Approve the 2025-2027 Ezra licensing agreement. Approve the purchase of new turnout gear. Approve the purchase of Wildland Technical Rescue PPE. Approve the purchase of a new Timeco sweeper for Environmental Equipment and Services Incorporated. Approve the pre-development agreement between the City of Hudson and Creative Home Construction Investments LLC for the property located at 515 Stage Line Road.
Could I have that removed from consent?
Approve the final development plan and conditional use permit at 410 Annabelle Way, the Atwood Property LLC, Hudson Coffee LLC. Approve setting a public hearing for proposed amendments to the Municipal Code, Chapter 225 Smoke Shops, and Chapter 255 Zoning and Table of Permitted Uses. Approve setting a public hearing for rezoning application at 777 Carmichael Road from AR Agriculture Residential to B2 General Business Faith Community Church. And approve the 2027 Locust Street reconstruction request for proposal for preliminary design services.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve the calendar, or consent agenda with the exception of item I. All right,
Yep.
roll call.
Morissette.
Yes.
Wakefield.
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes.
Kennedy.
Yes.
Brook.
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
Motion's approved, consent agenda is approved. Item I.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I just wanted to highlight this. I didn't notice that it had been discussed at the Plan Commission prior to today. I don't know if anyone is here from community development staff or not, but I didn't understand the whole process. I just saw this as a new development project, which I think is exciting and will bring more homes to Hudson. So I'm not drawing it. I just wanted to draw attention to it and discuss it briefly to understand the process a little bit. I know I've heard from our city staff that our municipal code, our zoning requirements, it's almost like we're playing ping pong sometimes with the Plan Commission. You know, they initiate something, then we okay it, and back and forth. Is this an example of a new development that the council has to accept first before they appear, or could someone explain that to me?
No, not necessarily. These pre-development agreements, we start with the process of making sure that the developer is going to pay all the costs associated with the staff's time in review. So most of the time, you'll see these pre-development agreements, and if you work through the provisions, essentially they're saying, we agree to provide an escrow. I think in this case, it's $20,000. We agree to pay for city staff. We agree to guarantee payment and keep that escrow replenished to a certain point. So this is the contractual obligation to pay, essentially. And then as the development moves forward, it will go through the Plan Commission process or the City Council process, whichever is required based upon what they're doing.
Sure. Thank you for explaining that. So in other words, there's other projects in Hudson that I just wasn't on the council, probably when they were in pre-development. So something like the Bella Rose development, that whole corner, the Atwood property, would have engaged in a similar, and I see what you're saying about guaranteeing or warranting the work
Yeah, so
that the
every,
city staff.
That's right, yes.
every significant project that comes through generally has a pre-development agreement associated where the staff, your community development staff, your engineer, anybody else on staff is going to incur expense. And so we want to make sure that the developer is fronting all of that cost. So, you know, these agreements are typically kind of the start of the project, the start of the process, and then it moves forward from there.
Thank you. Were you going to add anything else?
No, I was just identifying the same thing that Nick was.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate the time.
correct.
I just wanted to further my knowledge, and also I think it's good to highlight it for the public that there is a project on the horizon coming in with, I believe, single-family homes, if I'm not mistaken. Is that what's being identified? as
Townhomes.
Potential townhomes?
Townhomes.
Or twin homes, thank you. I believe it is twin homes. Very good. I move to approve item
Second.
I.
Motion second to approve, excuse me, discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Direct staff to prepare a resolution and begin the vacation process to partially discontinue a portion of undeveloped public right-of-way for 3rd Street and undeveloped alleyway generally located north of Pine Street, Elizabeth Schlomka and Jack Moore, Abigail Ritchie.
I'll take this one, Mr. Mayor. So what you have here is the beginning of a process for vacation of a public right-of-way. This is at the far north end of 3rd Street, an undeveloped portion of 3rd Street lying north of Pine Street. and south of the railroad property. And then there's a small alley portion as well. Your community development staff, Mike and team, looked at this, talked with Public Works, Utilities, and the rest of the staff. There's apparently no public purpose for this area, and the property is proposed to be split between the two adjoining, or two neighboring properties. And then the alley will be attached to that property on the other side. But you have a couple of different options at this point. If you want to declare that it's in the public interest to discontinue this right away because there's no public purpose, you can direct staff to move forward with the resolution to begin the vacation process. If you don't believe that it's in the public interest to move forward, you can direct the applicant to file a petition and start down that road. But from internally, your staff that has reviewed it, Mike and team, find it to be in the public interest to move forward with this vacation, given that there's no other public necessity for this particular property.
I'll move to direct staff to prepare the resolution.
Second.
Motion and second. Further discussion?
I just have one question. If that does happen, would there be a possibility that either of those neighboring properties could eventually say, I want it, not this neighbor, I'll take it on, and potentially try to sell it or do something with it?
No, so what happens under state law when you vacate a right-of-way, by operation of law, it splits 50-50 to each side, and then it attaches to that neighboring property. So it, just by moving through this process and the city adopting the discontinuance or the vacation, it will automatically attach to their parcel, and you're not gonna have separate parcels that are saleable or buildable or anything like that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Direct staff to prepare a resolution and begin the vacation process to partially discontinue a portion of undeveloped public alleyway running from Cole Street to Pitt Street, generally located between 10th Street and 11th Street, Pat Casanova.
So this is another discontinuance, this time of an alleyway, runs between what will be the backyard of future development of 6 single-family homes between 10th and 11th. Internally, staff reviewed this application with Public Works, Utilities, and Community Development. No utilities in the area. Staff didn't foresee the area being developed for any future roadway or any other public use. Accordingly, staff is recommending the preparation of a resolution to move forward with the vacation as it being in the public interest to do so.
Move to approve?
Second?
Motion is second to approve. Discussion?
I do have a question about this one. I see that neighbors have signed that they're okay with this decision and this process, but according to the issue sheet, the parcel would be attached to the Casanova property. Is that correct, or is it split? I mean, we just talked about the one by the railroad right away being split by the adjacent property owners. Maybe I'm misreading this, but if vacated, this was the first paragraph in the background on the issue sheet. If vacated, the entire alley would be returned to the easterly parcels currently addressed. And I hate to be the nitpicky one, but that's a typo. It's actually 739 11th Street. So we need to, I don't think that needs to be corrected in any official records, but if anyone's looking it up, that's slightly transposed numbers there. By the right of signature acquisition. So does that mean that all of that alleyway is assigned to just one parcel? I mean, because they have agreed to that, or?
That's what they're proposing, yes. That's what it appears to be.
Okay, so that's a little different than the scenario that we just discussed by the railway.
Correct. And you can only do that if the adjoining parcel owners that would have benefited from the vacation sign off and agree that the property goes to the other side.
Sure. Because, sure, there is benefit of having more property, but I'm assuming at some point property taxes might go up too, so the neighbor has to agree one way or the other.
Correct.
About this new parcel. Okay, thank you, that was my only question.
Anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Direct staff to obtain a property assessment for City of Hudson parcel 236-0132-00-000.
So this goes back to the first vacation that the council acted on. You'll see in your packet that there's a small triangular parcel at the end of Pine Street that the applicant on that first vacation, Elizabeth Schlumka, has expressed interest in purchasing. Staff internally has reviewed this parcel. There are no utilities. It's undeveloped. It's 401 square feet in size, so it's pretty small. So as part of that vacation process and to clear the title and kind of clean this up, the applicant has expressed an interest in purchasing potentially that parcel from the city. In order to sell land, we need to do an appraisal or some sort of valuation assessment. And so staff is recommending that the council direct staff and the city attorney to obtain a property assessment or appraisal for the purpose of potentially selling this small parcel.
And then final sale would come back here.
Correct.
Right. Just
So
to make
moved.
sure you understand.
Second?
Motion second to approve. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion on short-term rentals and staff timeline for completion. So, let me just start, okay? This is something that was originally on the agenda as something different. There was a group that had been contacted to come in and make a presentation about facilitating the process for us to do this. And when I saw that, I thought this really should be in the realm, the domain of our city staff. And I see no reason to be paying for a consultant, so thought we'd have this discussion here tonight to talk about what it is exactly we want staff to do and a timeline specific for accomplishing this. And I know that this has been sitting out there for some time, for 2-3 years more. And I think we've taken a couple swings at this, and nothing really substantive has been done. So that brings us to the point where we want to have the conversation. Councilmember Brooke has been very taking the lead on this, and would really like to get this accomplished by the 1st of May. Is that right? I don't want to speak for you on that, but.
That is accurate. And we have a moratorium that will come
Would
due
expire in June, I believe.
in June, so we certainly want to have this ready to go in advance of that. And so,
So unfortunately, we don't have anybody here from the department.
I guess I can aid a little bit in that. So Mike did reach out to an individual that does public forums, in which that individual was going to come and present on what they would do to take the steps through bringing public inclusion into the process of what we're going to do with short-term rentals. And they had, I believe they were establishing like a 3 or 4 step process in which they would get public involvement both from the rental facilities that are out there, hotels, motels, and the group, or the group of, I think, what is there, 14 is what we were told, about
Roughly.
14 of these short-term rentals that currently exist that we know of. So there's always that part.
Right.
So they would get public input from those groups first, then also public input from the general public, and then maybe input from the surrounding neighbors to hopefully come to some sort of idea of where we're heading with the actual ordinance, and potentially is there a quota that we would put into the short-term rental process. how many should the city have in the end. So I know when it was first presented with the moratorium, Mike had said, and I believe Sarah had requested, that there be some sort of public input session, whether that's handled internally or whether that we seek out a firm to be able to handle that process. Mike had promised that there would be some sort of public input process, right? The idea is if we go with an external firm, it's a little more independent. You could go with internal staff. I'm sure the staff could figure out a way to handle it, but their bandwidth is only so much too at this point. I think we've done, the progress has been very little over the last 8 months of the moratorium, or 7 months of the moratorium, and we have a very limited time to get the rest of it done, right? To be able to bring it in. Nick, I'm not sure about extending the moratoriums. I know you can do that, but there's a point of where we have to be showing results, or at least that we're making effort to move forward in the process.
Yeah, this is not a zoning moratorium. This is a permitting moratorium, so we have more
A
flexibility.
little more flexibility there? Okay.
That being said, we'll want a process that's clear. I mean, we know that the vacation rental homeowners are active, and they want to know what the rules are too, as do those that are trying to book rooms in town. So outlining a clear process that has at least metrics or, opportunities for clear communication will be important.
So the one of the questions that we had when it was first, I guess on Friday when we pulled it from the agenda, we didn't have really a cost estimate on it, what this might cost. The individual did shoot us some numbers of what it might cost for the process. Probably take them about maybe 2 months, 3 months at the total. And it's between $2,500 and $3,000 for them to be able to do that work, as opposed to staff handling the brunt of the work. So that's what's being eventually asked, and the timeline, I think we could meet the timeline with that as well. Otherwise, we'll have to, if we choose not to go that path, or we choose not to bring in an individual, we'll have to have our planning or our community development staff try to focus more on that with the other things that they have going as well, but that's where we're at.
Has there been any data gathered yet? Like you said, there was going to be data gathered from the rental units or the whatever, that.
Not that I'm aware
There's
of.
been no data gathered?
I can't speak to that. I shouldn't say not that I'm aware. Mike is obviously not here today. I think everybody's caught a little bit of that virus going around, but I would need to ask Mike where we're at with any data collection. I'm not exactly sure, but.
Because we're kind of under a time frame that seems to be shortening if we have not collected data at this time to help guide us on what our policy would be.
We are, I guess, and not really knowing, it's not on the table, it's not presented. The question would be, because it is a moratorium, it is handled by the council, not by like the planning commission or any of the other committees. It's handled at the council level. And Nick, am I wrong in stating that? I just want to make sure that it's a council issue. Would that individual, or should that individual come to show what their process is at the next meeting or not? I mean, that's the question of the council. And then make a decision based on that, plus our timeline, and then Mike would be here as well to make a decision as to whether or not we go down inviting outside help in, or we try to go our own path.
Because of the nominal fee, I think it'd behoove us to go ahead and get somebody to come and help, so we don't put any more time constraints on staff with development projects that are in the pipeline.
Yes, well, and again, it's not on the agenda tonight as an approval, right? So we'd still have to bring it at the next meeting for an approval of the funds, right? And I'd have to explain where we're gonna shift the dollars to do this piece as opposed to maybe something else that drops out of the budget, so that you're aware of what that would mean, right?
But an
So,
outside
yes.
entity could, it sounds like from what you said, could accomplish this in 3 months?
I believe that's what
2
the
to 3 months.
timeline is
2 to 3 months?
being proposed, at least for that part of the data, and then we'd still have a couple months to try to wrap up what we're doing and hopefully shape an ordinance that is satisfactory to everybody. I'm gonna tell you, whatever you decide on an ordinance, in the end, right, ordinances are evolving, they're ever changing, you can change them to continue to move with the times. And a lot of times, anything throughout the state gets challenged on any one of these ordinances that are developed. Obviously, we have to shift gears and redo something on our end. I think that's what happened with a few of the items that we've had to adjust already. So again, whatever you decide, it's not the end all, it's gonna shape and change throughout time.
Could I ask a question?
yes.
Thank you. So this outside consultant group, would they be presenting us a document that was prepared legally to stand as an ordinance? Or would they be giving us feedback that then our legal and in-house team would need to shape into the
I
ordinance?
think we would have to get, well, again,
So it wouldn't necessarily be an
I haven't
end
seen the full
product,
presentation. I
right.
don't know what that part of it is, so I don't know if that's.
Right. I mean, it's a nominal fee.
You're right.
It
that
is
the
a
full
nominal
completion
fee.
of an ordinance, or is
Right.
that just the gathering of information?
I would bet that it's just gathering
That's what I
and
would
getting
think, too.
impressions and, interacting with the public. I know that having community input is important. So I think that's interesting. Like I said, we can't take a vote on that tonight, but since this item is an agenda item, I'd be interested in having a discussion amongst us as council members. What do you hear about how things have been working in the community? Do you have short-term rentals in your districts? Are you hearing from people? Can we have that discussion?
I think that would be part of what you would pull together, or staff.
But that,
Yes.
we can, yes, we
We
can have
can
that
talk about it
discussion right
tonight.
now.
Yep.
We can talk about it tonight, because I think at the end, we need, as council members, to lead the way.
Before we go into that, can we just stick to money for 2 seconds? And I totally think you're right on having some council discussion on that. So the $2,500 and $3,000, thanks for that point of clarification, if that includes the ordinance. And I have a feeling you're probably correct on that, Councilmember Knudsen. But that being said, if we go that route, that with the engagement, we probably wouldn't need to have our city attorney present at those meetings. Whereas if we were doing it in-house, we might want to have Nick there. So that's another thing to think about from a cost perspective.
And these wouldn't be meetings that are organized and run like a public hearing. That's not what this would be. These are, your.
Kind of like you do them at the fire station and
yes,
you
yep,
you
your
post it in the
charrettes.
newspaper or whatever.
Yep, your public charrettes where you're bringing in as much information as possible.
Because
That would bring us a document that at least we could work off of. Then if we wanted to make changes from what we've heard from constituents and things, at least it would be a working document we'd start with, rather than trying to create it on our own.
Well,
I believe that's the goal, but again, without the individuals here and without Mike here as a overall, I think it's kind of, we're talking hypotheticals without the two key people that would be following through the process, right? I think that's what we would want. But
Yeah, I mean, part of the question is really an identification of what the concerns are. You have a solid ordinance right now, but we want to build on it. And so is parking a concern? Is signage a concern? Is noise a concern? We want to, as we build out this ordinance, we want to understand just what areas are kind of the hot button issues with respect to this type of use in our residential neighborhoods. And then the question of, do we have too many? Do we not have enough? Do we want to make them more available? Do we want to cap them? Those are the types of discussions. They're less legal and they're more facilitative in terms of what do you all want to do from a policy perspective based on the feedback that you're receiving from your constituents and the priorities in your wards and amongst your neighborhoods, because that's really where this hits hardest, is in our residential neighborhoods. And so what do we want to see? How restrictive do we want to be? What do we want those hard lines to be when we're looking at updating the ordinance and building it out specifically?
So that's where, and I agree that having an outside company that specializes in this could get us maybe from point A to point B a lot faster. But the approach to me is, we already have an ordinance, like you said. We could consider it outdated or not current or something that we have to make, build upon. Do we start there and we're kind of fill in the missing pieces, or the pieces we identify as broken or need changing or updating? Or do we start, you know, it sounds like if we hire this outside firm, they come in with a sheet of paper and say, what do you guys want? I can do anything for you. Like, we don't want to run away from what we have now.
Right.
And I was
So it's
gonna.
almost building
yeah.
backwards.
And I was gonna say, I wouldn't even characterize our ordinance as outdated or antiquated. You know, we've only had it in place for like 4 or 5 years or so.
Yeah.
And it was modeled off of other
Right.
communities. I think we took a pause to really kind of look at it and say, how do we need it tailored for this community? The base worked, you know, we have 15 or 17?
Something like that.
Something like that, and we don't have that many issues, but there are issues that come up that involve the PD and that involve
Sure.
staff. So that's, you know, it's really just a spot to look at it and say, is what we have now what we want? Or is it time to change it and adjust in any particular area to make sure that we're really regulating short-term rentals the way we want to?
Right. And again, just to answer that question, if we said, hey, we do have an ordinance, let's work on this one. Back to the question, are we gonna get a final clean document to approve or not? Let's start where we're at now and build on that, as opposed to starting, you know, from, because the outside company is not gonna know what our ordinance is till we give it to them, so.
You know,
Right.
we need to get something resolved here. There's no doubt about it. And I'm with Sarah. I think that we should try to get this in place for the upcoming season. I am absolutely opposed to bringing in somebody from the outside to do this. This is what our staff is being paid to do. And our taxpayers are already paying staff to do that, and now you want taxpayers to pay for somebody else to come in and help them out. I don't really believe that we're gonna get much more information than we already have coming from public hearings, and that's not to say that we shouldn't do them. We all got the complaints throughout the seasons. We know that parking is an issue. We know that noise is an issue. We know that hours rental is an issue. The number, no matter who places a number, a limit, whether it's a consultant or whether it is community development or whether it's the council, it's an arbitrary number, no matter who comes in with that number. So we just gonna accept a recommendation because we paid for it? So I think that we have the resources, and I think that it's incumbent upon us to be judicial with how we spend taxpayer dollars, knowing that we already have staff in place that can do this. You can have your public hearings, you can go out to the neighbors, they're gonna tell you everything that we already know. And then it's just a question of, where do you get information about what do ordinances look like in communities like ours? And you know where you find that? In the communities that look like ours, which is exactly what a consultant is gonna do.
Well, and an attorney to tell us what we're allowed to do.
Yeah,
And I doubt that this group is a legal firm. I think they're more of a public relations, public engagement, just like we authorized an RFP to get public engagement for Locust Street. You know, what do the residents, what do the property owners want? I think it is good to hear from people.
yeah.
I think it comes down to enforcement. That's our challenge. We might have an excellent ordinance. How are we going to enforce it? I see that as a real issue in parts of town with other code enforcements. I was jokingly wishing Officer Kuzmarek well now that he got to step back from having the role of code enforcement, because there's issues in town, signs that are put up permanently, you know. These aren't just at short-term rentals, these are other places. Boats that are parked in front yards for years at a time, and that's not allowed. But someone has to say, knock, 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 hello, property owner, you're not allowed to have a boat parked in your front yard. Or various engine parts that might be transmission, you name it. Things like that, it's challenging because we don't have a big enough staff. We do have staff that can help create. We've got, legal advice, and Mr. Vivian has already assisted us with drafting it and changing it. And our community development team, and we have resources through the League of Municipalities. I think it comes down to, once we have that all drafted, how are we going to put some teeth in it so that the neighbors who happen to be living next to someone who has, a short-term rental in their neighborhood, what do they do? Do they have to pick up the phone all the time if there's an issue? Who's going to come? We already did have one hearing about a complaint a year and a half or so ago. I don't recall the actual time frame, but I think that's going to be a challenge for us that we need to just acknowledge. Even if we have the most crafted ordinance, how do we make sure in real time? I mean, you get the emails on Monday morning about the party that went on and the cars parked all over the cul-de-sac and on people's yards, et cetera, because there was a party at the Airbnb over the weekend, an unlicensed one, by the way, which, our city staff knows about that. But what do we do when someone doesn't have a license and is doing that also? Again, how are we going to enforce this? I know that we have an answer today. I just want to raise that as an issue because it's a concern for me about other things that are in our municipal code, signage, parking of recreational vehicles, things like that. They're all sometimes people just don't know what the rules are, and so they need to be reminded of that.
Focusing back on what,
Yeah,
it's good.
thank you.
But focusing back on this, what are we trying to accomplish by the moratorium?
We wanted to buy time in order to get a good ordinance together, so we'd have a chance, and to gather information about how many were out there. We weren't even sure. So we just wanted to take a little time so that we could get a little bit of a database, so we had an idea of what, the extent of the problem, if you want to call it a problem, but the extent of the situation that we have here in Hudson.
Well, are we trying to find a solution to a problem that we haven't identified yet, or I'm missing something here? And I think I've brought this up a couple times in the past.
Yeah.
What are we doing this for? Because we haven't enforced somebody who had a complaint on one issue we had in the past? I mean, we really need to identify what we're trying to do here, and I don't think we're doing it.
Well, I think we're discovering that there's more out there than we thought. And so suddenly we went from having 14 or 15 that we might have, and then we're discovering that there's more out there. And we want to make sure that we're protecting the residents that are living in the communities that are paying the taxes, that we're protecting them.
Well, there's two trains of thought you can go with that. Is God bless them for being an entrepreneurial spirit, or no, we don't want that kind of riffraff on every other block. So is that what we're trying to identify? And we've identified it, we have a rule on the book, the ordinance. So is it enforcement, or do we have to go deeper into a policy and penalize an entrepreneur? Or penalize whoever's causing the problem?
Well, and that's where I think some engagement and making sure that we're hearing from folks would be helpful in making those decisions.
Are we creating a problem, a bigger problem than it is?
I don't think so. I think this needs to be addressed, and we need to get some policy in place.
We have an ordinance.
We need to tighten it up a bit and figure out if we want to limit how many we're going to allow in our community.
So the concern is about the number.
That's one of the concerns, but as the other ones were mentioned, we have parking, how many to a room, hours, those types of things.
And each of those properties needs to have safety inspection, fire inspection, et cetera. So if we have a lot of unlicensed one, which is what I'm suspecting, I don't know if the clerk's office was inundated with a lot of new applications or you just became aware that there were more in the community, but it is a public safety issue. It's not just noise and riffraff. People come and if people don't know, it goes back to, I didn't know I couldn't park my boat in my front yard, because if you don't know that you're required to be licensed. So the particular property that I'm referring to that came to my attention last summer is unlicensed, and they were sent to at least one letter from the city and still proceeded to have more engagement, had more rentals there. So how do we put any teeth in that then? What do you do when someone doesn't have a license to even loose?
Yeah.
What is our...
And I'm aware of one that came to mind after we put the moratorium, so.
Yeah, I think up in
there's several.
There's one for sure. We're getting complaints about that.
Yep.
So one of the things that also wanted to add is that community development department or consultant, I know one place that they're gonna go, you know, and we're either gonna pay additional for it, or we're just gonna use the staff that we have, and that's the League of Municipalities. They've got the clearinghouse, and that's where people are gonna go for the information. And, you know, they're gonna be able to provide us with the type of tools, not using that term necessarily, but certainly they're gonna be able to, they're gonna have a lot of the different municipalities' ordinances that are in place already, provide us with the information that we need. There's a lot of help out there that our department can go to. I personally, as you know, say it again, but I think this should be done in-house. I don't see any reason to go outside and pay money to do this, because they're gonna be going to the exact same places we are, and we already know what most of the problems are because we've dealt with them here. Our department knows that. And we're gonna pay somebody to get up to speed and then provide us with the same information the department would provide us with.
So are you suggesting that our department staff, or whoever it is, the city staff, hold public engagement meetings? Because, to keep with that commitment
Yep,
that we want to get
absolutely.
input.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what they do. You know, we do that all the time. So, and, so yes, that's what I'm suggesting. I know that we're not gonna come to a conclusion here tonight, but, well, people in their minds may, but we're not gonna be able to vote on it. But yes, that's what I'm suggesting. I think that, and I wanna set out a timeline. I wanna be very strict with the timeline and make sure that whatever the final product is, that we have it in place by beginning of the season.
I think the timeline's essential
Yeah.
right now, so that we don't just keep having the same discussion over and over, saying we're gonna, we shoulda, that, who will set that timeline?
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, that's our job.
But when will we set that timeline?
We'll have it on the next agenda.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing, is there consensus? You know, I know there had been some thought, there had been a few people that thought we should bring in this outside consultant, at least to get the presentation. And if we did a comparison of how much city time staff would have to be taken to do this process, or are we at the point where we're thinking we're just moving forward with city staff?
It's a good question. I mean, these folks work a lot, and now we're gonna have them chasing after Airbnbs. Now we're gonna have them chasing after boats that aren't licensed. I mean, there's a lot of projects coming in town. For example, I'm just being facetious, Joy. You know, so they're gonna spend time and money on this stuff outside of, let's say, development projects or anything else that wants to come in and a bigger project. And here we are, talking about penalizing something that should be enforced with our ordinance that's already existing. So I'm really having a hard trouble, and for paying for somebody to come in, it's tourism related, you could take it out of the room tax dollars, it won't cost the taxpayer a dime, so that's touche,
We're running a deficit there, Randy.
touche on that. Tourism related. I'm having a hard time grasping, because you guys have a couple hot spots of Airbnbs that have gone the wrong way in your districts, or not being enforced or whatnot. I don't understand exactly what we're trying to solve here.
I think we're trying to take a strategic approach for how this is going to look moving forward. We don't have any teeth in our ordinance about numbers and making those good cases on how we want it to look moving forward.
And by gosh, I would think there's plenty of examples out there in other communities that actually have really, really expensive Airbnbs to rent, where we could use that as an example to put more teeth in our ordinance. But time and treasure is our staff.
Well, it's enforcement though, right? I mean, as has been said, I mean, you can have any number of different regulations, and ultimately, if somebody's going to violate, then you need to be prepared to enforce, and you need to be prepared to pursue. I do think there are some policy questions, like how many licenses do you want to issue? Right, that's gonna be a decision that the council has to answer. And how you decide to answer that, it could be through a public engagement process, or it could just be through council discussion to say, you know, we're gonna keep it where it is, we're gonna increase it, we're gonna decrease it, whatever. Do you want these things to fully blend in to the neighborhoods, or are you okay with signage out front? Are you okay with off-street parking as opposed to on-street parking? Like, those are the types of questions. It's not a binary choice between are they good or are they bad? That's not the question. The question is, how do you want to regulate them in the community? And is your ordinance sufficient to take care of the issues that you're seeing? You know, or do we need to make some changes? And
Clearly, it's a no from the conversation we're having. It's not sufficient to regulate, as you want to say.
that's a question that the council has to answer, right? Because each one of these things is a little bit, or criteria is a little bit different. You know, some may think they're just fine and we should have as many as we can in the community because they're an economic boon. Some may say, well, they're just different than residential neighborhoods and they create challenges for the people that live there all year round. So those are the discussions that collectively you have to have as a group in some structure and some format if we're going to discuss the ordinance. Whether you take public engagement and take that feedback and incorporate that into your process, or whether you say, we know enough about this issue, let's just put the ordinance on the agenda and work through it and have a conversation about these various points. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just a matter of what's the most comfortable and productive for the council.
And I think numbers are tricky to put a total number because there are different districts, different numbers of Airbnbs that, is it gonna be per block or, you know, the numbers that you have, I think those are gaps that are missing.
Back to Rich mentioned, you know, this is a description of kind of what they do for their job. And I don't know if we know, have we been approached saying this is too big of a project? That's why we've been kicking the can down the road. It's just over our heads. We need outside help. Or did it just because of the changes we've had and staff changes, are we just now kind of getting closer to the due date? And the rubber's meeting the road now. Has anyone, I mean, again, that, to me, we're saying, let's bring in someone outside. Are we at that breaking point? Because we've always been a lean and mean staff, right? Where we do it in-house, we burn some midnight oil here and there. Unless someone's popped up and said, there's no way we can get this done. It's just too big of a project over our heads. Again, it sounds to me like we take our old ordinance, start picking it apart, talking about parking and hours of operation, how many days a week, whatever. I think you have to do the work to figure out if we can do it in-house or not, rather than just us saying, yeah, let's bring in someone else and do the work. Because we're gonna get back to a flow of information that lands on our desk, and we're gonna say, okay, now we still have to do the ordinance. So I think we have to roll our sleeves up internally and look at it. And then if we say, wow, we need some specialized help here, then maybe we can have that conversation as an idea.
And that might be better with Mike here at the next meeting as well.
Yeah.
For further discussion.
My only concern with that, and I hear what you're saying, is if Mike does come back and say, I'm at bandwidth, and then we're just that much further down the pipeline. So I don't know if it makes sense for us to see the proposal as well as have city here, so we have both options.
At the next meeting?
But isn't it our job to direct city staff that if they're at bandwidth, that we talk about what their priorities are and ask if there's something that can be reduced to a lower priority so that this can get done?
So, yeah, I would agree with that. I certainly don't want to be critical of our department.
Absolutely not, yeah.
They do a good job, right? But this has been kicked around now for years.
So it sounds like we need to talk about it at our next meeting.
Well, I think it's been helpful just to discuss a little bit of what we're hearing and what's on our mind, the idea of the parking, on-street, off-street. Those are some of the things we need to bring to our city staff, our city attorney, or an outside consultant, if we do hire one, to say, find out what the public thinks about this, you know. I'm assuming if this is a firm that's dedicated to, I mean, they're pretty experienced in dealing with this particular topic, or have some expertise, or again, you don't know for sure?
I don't know for sure, but I think they're a firm that's dedicated to public hearing processes and to get public input.
Sure.
Whether it be through surveys or whether it be in public open forums, those type of things.
Sure.
To deal with collecting information.
Letting them, but being prepared to let them know these are some key areas of concern for us, if we do choose to hire someone. But I do think having our discussion tonight is fruitful, because we're now more engaged in thinking about it, and perhaps we'll hear more from our constituents as well with their thoughts. I don't
like we know
object to
the
hearing.
issues.
I don't object to hearing to the presentation of the firm. Pardon me?
It sounds like we know the issues. I guess I didn't know the issues, but after talking about this, it sounds like we're well aware of the issues, that we can start digging into the ordinance.
Yeah, I think it'll just come down to what the decision, just like what Nick was explaining. How many do you want to allow in the community? And, you know, the parking issues, all the little pieces of the zoning, where do you want to allow them in general? Airbnbs. So there are some condo units that I know do Airbnbs. There's, you know, the residential homes, and once they're blended into the neighborhood, how much should they blend into the neighborhood?
But would this firm tell us how to write the ordinance, or just tell us what?
I don't believe so.
So if we know kind of what's wrong, it seems like our energy should be put more into addressing the actual ordinance than finding out what we want in the ordinance. It sounds like we know what we want to have in it already. It sounds like that to me.
And this ordinance is the same as almost, the one that we have right, Nick, is the same as just about every jurisdiction out there.
Yeah, it's built off of other
It's-
model ordinances.
Exactly, it's built on all the model ordinances. The key pieces that are missing, and that I don't think you will get by just looking at other ordinances that are out there, is the final decisions on what you want to do with them. How many do you want to allow? Those pieces you're not going to get by looking at other jurisdictions, because whether it be, let's say it's just Menominee down the road, or maybe it's up in Door County, right? Door County probably allows a lot more Airbnbs because of the, you know, summer season and whatnot. But Menominee, maybe they don't. So we're going to be that same. It's going to be adjusted for what you wish to see. You're not going to glean a whole lot of other information from any other ordinance that is out there. What you have in place is the same that they have just about everywhere, and what the state allows you to do. Remember, they changed it from the 30-day to the 7-day, and all those other things that the state has kind of clamped onto the communities to kind of tighten things up for this particular topic. It makes it a little more difficult to regulate, because a 1-week Airbnb can't be regulated by what we do. They're here for 7 days. If they rent out on a 7-day period, we're out of the whole discussion. So it's going to come down to the decisions you want, and based on some recommendations from staff of what's possible, I guess.
The one element to also, just not to throw a monkey wrench into the system, but when we discussed this the last time, we did say when we looked at this policy, we would take community engagement. So that was a commitment we did make, so.
All right, so sounds like we've kind of exhausted the conversation here. We will invite him in, make his presentation at the next meeting, I guess, if that's what people want.
And city staff will also present what they could do as well, so we have a
Yeah,
comparison and a timeline.
Yeah. Is that what you want? You guys want the other person in here?
It doesn't hurt to hear his
Yeah.
proposal.
Doesn't hurt.
Right.
And I do understand your point too, but then we'll have that department here as well.
All right, so, are we good? Conversation? Excellent. So I don't have anything other than, I hope everybody had great holidays and, Happy New Year to everybody for the new year ahead.
So our next meeting is the beginning of February then?
No,
We-
the.
We are having one on the
Tuesday, the
Tuesday.
21st?
Yeah.
Tuesday, the 21st.
Okay.
The day after the Notre Dame championship.
Yes, it is.
Go Big Ten, yeah.
All right, anybody else?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Got a motion, second to adjourn, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved, we stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.